I'm Jeremy Jocelyn. I'm the Executive Director of OpenSPP.
I'm Greg Martel. I'm Director in charge of Strategy and Communication.
I am Michel Mouchirou. I'm Director in charge of Partnerships and Engagement at OpenSPP. So the use case in Lao comes from a partnership that we have with the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry. It's about applying and using OpenSPP, which is a digital public good, initially created for social protection management information systems and social protection, delivery of social protection benefits, but applying it to the context of agriculture in the creation of a digital farmer registry. Essentially, what a digital farmer registry does, it collects all the data and assets that are related to agriculture in a country, the type of agriculture that is being done, the type of farmers data, and community data, and it aggregates that data to be able to enable better services in terms of delivery of technical assistance, financial assistance, in favor of farmers, right? The main intention behind this use case is that in Lao PDR there is not at the moment a single system that sort of collects all the necessary information to be able to essentially improve policy making in the sector of agriculture, but also to understand what is actually being serviced or supported towards the farmers. So the use case is going to focus on aggregating data of different projects that is currently being done in separated ways, and to be able to integrate that data and leverage it to have a better picture of what the agricultural sector is, especially looking at projects that work in the field of irrigation. And irrigation is very important towards achieving targets in nutrition, targets towards improving market access for farmers, also, and in terms of food safety, for food security for communities. I think for us, we were very motivated to work into the agricultural sector because Lao PDR is essentially an agricultural country, right? About 80% of the population rely on agriculture for their livelihoods. So agriculture is a key socio-economic sector that is a driver for people's lives, everyday life, right? Then secondly, Lao is organized as communities, and agriculture is organized around communities. So although it's smallholder farmers that essentially produce, they sort of are grouped, or we are grouped in terms of communities, right? So there was also a need to see and have a better idea of how this is working, what kind of crops they're producing, what kind of agriculture is happening, and all of this in a backdrop with the increasing challenges of environment and climate change. So we saw that although there are a lot of initiatives, there are a lot of good projects happening, as it happens a lot of times in cooperation and development initiatives, things tend to sort of be overlapping, things tend to be replicated, and sometimes we do not capitalize enough on what is actually being done and created and achieved, right? So having the possibility to digitalize, but also build, have a vision in terms of how we're going to digitalize the services that are being done, the type of data that is being collected, right? The type of results that are being achieved would essentially bring us to another level of understanding of the sector of agriculture, and to build a layer where different sectors, different services, different actors could benefit of that data in order to enable other services such as financial support, technical assistance, or what we call extended services in agriculture. I think in terms of success, it is still a little bit too early for us to really talk about success in the case of our work in Laos, right? First of all, you have to bear in mind that this is a pilot action that we are doing. So it's very much about testing, showing the worth, aggregating data, making sure that we understand the requirements and are able to build the foundational specifications for that digital public infrastructure to then be rolled out nationally, right? So it's still for us a little bit too early to think about it in terms of a successful implementation. But what we have noticed and what we, I think, can be happy about is that the integration of multiple data points under a specific sector of agriculture, which is linked to irrigation, is really helping to understand the impact of the public sector action in terms of nutrition targets, production that can access markets, essentially generate more benefits, more revenues for the farmers, and then how crops are being distributed and can complete or can really contribute to the overall food safety of Lao PDR, right? Then in terms of our role, I think it's really about aligning what is the national policy vision at the moment through the implementation of different programs and projects, right? With the advantages of building a foundational layer, which essentially will enable one key thing, which is sovereignty of data for the Lao PDR government, right? So that means that they don't have data scattered in different places, but they will be able to centralize and aggregate data, consolidate data, and then reuse it across all the different programs and policies. So in that sense, it's very interesting for us to also see that we are starting from essentially scattered information, helping to consolidate it, regardless of which type of databases exist or which government services is working on it, and then including that data so that many different sources can access and use it, right? We are also helping to I think increase the understanding of why it's important to build digital public infrastructure. There had been great initiatives in Laos already around payments, cross-border payments, for example. So there is a clear understanding that digitalization can be of benefit for the country, for businesses, for citizens, right? And now it's really about how we can apply it across governments so that data is leveraged, so that services are integrated, so that sectors can communicate to each other, and essentially increasing the benefits towards the citizens, or in our case, towards the farmers.
I think as DPG and as DPG owner, there is a lot of roles we can play around this. First one is understanding, explaining what is DPI, right? Across different government sectors. They usually don't know this, it's something fairly new, and we have work to do on this, and we need to support them also to translate this into the reality, right? What DPI is on concept, moving it to the reality of what does it mean for agricultural department or social protection department. We also advocating for interoperability, like what the importance of working together and reusing building blocks as part of the infrastructure, right? Also, DPGs have a lot of expertise because they're working across a lot of context, across a lot of region, and they can take things that they learn in one place, that work in one place, and share it at least with other government, other ministries to see if that can help resolve their problem. So we still need also to keep in mind to localizing the solution, right? Because one solution working in one country might not be working in another one, in another context, right? Countries are very different and contexts are very different. So context is very important. Sharing more information, publishing more around the DPI, the value, what we're learning. And also where we can be good is bridging the technology side and the policy, right? Because DPGs are not just technical people building technical software, right? It's usually people that have been there for a fairly long time, knows quite well the domain and have a lot of experience and can bring this experience of bridging the two technical solutions with what the country is trying to achieve with the policy. And so we can help demonstrate how DPI can enhance the service delivery and planning for this. As for the key stakeholders needed, there is a lot of stakeholders that need, and this is where it's really important, but at the same time it's challenging, right? So for us, one of the key stakeholders is the local system integrators, right? So OpenSPP is trying to work with system integrators that are locals, because they bring the local knowledge, the local context, and help provide better solutions, right? And they can also support long-term the DPI. And it's important to think long-term, right? We're not here to do a project that will be there for 2 years, right? Our goal is to do something that will be there for the next 10, 20 years, even more, like depending on the context and the use case. Government official for sure, and there is different levels. It can be technical people because they need to understand what we're trying to achieve. They need to understand the concept of DPI, but we also need decision making, right? Because it's quite changing. It's quite important. So like we need also champion at who are able to make decision in the government, and they need to be able to have the courage to innovate and to test new things and to change, right? Because DPIs are fairly new, but it's a way to move forward, right? I think also another group is funders and donors. So either IFIs or donors, to be able for them to understand what is the importance of DPI and DPGs in the projects they are doing with governments, right? So seeing as they design the project with the government, seeing like how does this strategy can work on this. They can also provide support for and financial support for the DPI initiative, but also for the DPGs, right? DPGs needs to have support to be able to support countries, right? So I think funders and donors have this important role to play, and also finally on helping aligning the funding strategies, right, with the DPI goal of the country. Another important thing that is usually difficult and more difficult than the technical aspect is a cross-ministerial collaboration, right? We don't need cross-ministerial collaboration to get started, but having it multiply the value of what we're doing with DPI. So it's important on the long run to be able to have a vision, cross-ministerial mandate and cooperation for DPI. And finally, the private sector, right? Because also DPI, we should not forget, the goal is also to enable private sector to build use cases. So it's important to involve them to deliver good DPI. Another one that is quite important also is the civil society, and this one is probably sometimes forgotten, right? But as it's foundational system for the country, it's important that civil society is also there to be able to help and review and represent also the citizen interest in the design of the solutions and ensure the inclusivity and accessibility of the system. I think DPI is bringing a more holistic and interconnected ecosystem, right? Like when we're talking about digitization, we're more thinking about things, as you mentioned, in silos and that are not communicating. So we see with things moving more and more digital, and we saw it on the, I would say, commercial net online, like we need interoperability between the system, and within government, if government want to be able to innovate, they need to have this interoperability and interconnection of the different systems. We need to enable seamless data sharing between the services and service integration. We need also for scalability and future proofing, right? And one key thing also is taking things small so that we can make them evolve and we can replace pieces when we need to, right? A system needs to be able to evolve. If we're talking about having a system that we need to support for the next 10, 20, 30 years, we will have to replace some part. Technology is evolving, requirements are evolving all the time. It's important to be able to take these small bites efforts. As being on silos with digitization, it's very hard to have visibility, high-level visibility on things that is happening, right? And crossing the data. There is like, in theory, it's always possible. The reality is reconciling different databases that have been captured with different identifier, different information, make it very hard to do better analysis that allows good policy making decisions. So it's also quite important. I think interoperability, oftentimes the problem with digitalization is there is no thinking around how does this system going to interact with another system, and with the next one. Maybe it's going to interact with one existing system. But I think with DPI, the good thing is that we're building for systems that don't exist, for use cases that we haven't imagined yet. So we're focusing on building standard API that are flexible to allow many use cases later on that we haven't been thought about. And I think India had tremendous success with doing this, right? On the other side, we also need to be careful with inclusivity, right? And I think DPI, it's at the core of DPI, but it also can be forgotten. So I think like around inclusivity, it's very important to think about it. And we can put process in place, like rules in place at the government level around what needs to be done and how do we access to the last mile. Like, I mean, our work is a lot with social protection, farming. It's oftentimes the people that are the most difficult to reach out because they're in remote villages. They are not always digitally literate. So DPI thinking can help push people to think about this population also that are important and that can benefit probably the most of all this work. Another key thing is really data sovereignty and security. For us, like it's really key to emphasis on local ownership and control over data. Again, traditional solution, proprietary solution have been locking often government into a system, into a hosting that makes them later on to make it evolve without high cost, for example. With DPI, there is a much more emphasis on local ownership and control over the data, but also over the infrastructure. And it's crucial for digital sovereignty of government. And finally, I think DPIs, by providing interoperability by default, right? It's in the DNA of DPIs. It allows to create more innovation, right? I mean, traditional IT project, if it hasn't been in the spec, most of the time there's not going to be API, or if there's going to be an API, it's going to be very specific to a use case. DPI is promoting much more generic APIs, and that would support much more innovation from both the public sector, but also the private sector, to build new services on top. And I think this is really important, and that's why we often say that DPIs can be a multiplier effect, right? Because it enables things that we haven't been thinking about already when we designed the project.
So we are working with the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry of Lao PDR, and more specifically with its Department of Irrigation. So the Department of Irrigation will benefit directly from the Digital Farmer Registry, which represents the introduction of the first digital public good in Lao PDR's agricultural sector. For the Department of Irrigation, the value in using this system is to gradually integrate data from more than 20 different projects. So instead of having many independent systems, or in some cases even spreadsheets, they will now have a greater and better general overview, and where all the data is integrated and easily accessible. So down the road, this system will help them make better data-driven decisions and consequently gradually improve policy making and program targeting. One of the main benefits for the farmers themselves is that they will receive better targeted support through a more informed system that is shared across different agricultural sectors. So one of our primary objectives in developing the Digital Farmer Registry in Lao PDR is to enhance and streamline the delivery of agricultural services. Our efforts are focused on making a tangible impact at both the community level and as well as for smallholder farmers themselves. A critical aspect of our approach is respecting and integrating traditional community practices such as land distribution into the system, which is something that is challenging because different parts of the country may have different approaches to land distribution and how land is cultivated by one family or the other. But if we look further into the project, as we continue to build and refine this farmer registry, the potential for better data collection and analysis becomes increasingly clear. So it's really down the road as we continue to aggregate more projects. So we're gonna first start, and we are working with the Department of Irrigation, but the value will also be in integrating more projects outside of this department and having all the departments of the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry pushing their data and also pulling data from the registry. So the value again becomes clearer as we move forward and more projects are using the registry instead of using their own system or spreadsheet or even paper-based documents. So this improved data capability will not only strengthen the delivery of services, but also promote financial inclusion. This is one part we would like to insist on, and this is also something that will happen down the road. It takes time, but by enabling farmers to verify their credentials and link them to their agricultural practices, the registry will empower them with greater access to financial opportunities. So really, because we allow them to prove what they are doing on which land, they will be able to really prove that they are worth of receiving, for instance, a loan. So that's also something that will be made possible by this digital farmer registry.
You cannot have a perfect environment to be able to build a DPI, right? So you need to get started, start small, and get the ball rolling, right? And then you can evolve, and that can start at the department level and evolve later on to the whole government strategy, right? Begin by identifying what are the current problems that you have that could be benefit from a single reusable block, right? That could become your DPI. Plan for future integration. But for example, we often talk about identity, interoperability, are key foundation. But like, don't wait for example, a digital foundational identity to be ready before you start. You can start building a solution and then integrate with it when it's ready. Ideally, plan for this integration, make sure the system can support it later, but you don't need to wait for it to start. I think also to be really a DPI, you need to focus also on your core department's competency, right? To not go on the turf of other ministries, which could create problems after, right? So focus on what you think is a service that other ministries can benefit from later on. That is your core competency. Focusing highly on interoperability also and modularity, right? And this is a big thing on the DPGs. Look at the DPGs, look at what exists, look at the standards around. There is a lot of people working on standard and interoperability around this. There is work being done also on demonstrating this interoperability. GovStack is doing it. SPDCI is doing it, G2P Connect are different things. So look at this ecosystem to see what can be more easily integrated. Think carefully also about data privacy and security, right? Like make sure you have a framework, global framework around this, right? It's really important. You need to build trust also with the citizen as you build these systems, right? So it's really important to have good foundation on this space. And the last one also is probably planning for sustainability, right? A DPI is not just a project that starts and finish in 6 months, in a year, in 2 years, right? So how is this system going to be maintained? How is this system going to be funded on the long term? Maybe there is a need to build a business model with this system, and maybe it's like some small fees when the private sector are benefiting from the system. Maybe it's some projects that are using it that could collaborate on funding it. I think it's really important to make sure that there is a long-term vision of how this is going to be supported, how this is going to be funded. Otherwise, it's going to die at the end of the project.
We could talk about our conversation with Singapore and with Norway, and actually that's one of the feedback they gave us, is that even for them the journey is a long journey. And with a lot of I would say challenges and unexpected things happen pretty much all the time, and so that's also when we did a call with them, that's also what was their recommendation, to actually start and then see how things develop, because also there is no, I mean, each country's journey is a different journey.
Maybe just to complete or to repeat, I think there are two main elements for me that are key in this DPI journey. As Greg said, one is the vision. You really need to think wholly, right? Sort of holistically as to what you're building and how much you can enable services for others, right? How you're going to really push for other people to use this and to achieve essentially their objectives, whether they're in government or in private sector or the end beneficiaries themselves, right? I think that has to be always at the key of everything that we are building and working on. And then the second one is really linked to that too. It's user adoption. I think none of this can really work if no one is using it. So you have to make it easy and practical for people to adopt it as part of their everyday tasks, facilitating their work, or quickly seeing where this can lead them to have an advantage or use it to their own advantage, basically. So I think that for me, this is a key enabler for DPIs, and this kind of, we call it human-centric approach, but definitely also impact-driven approach to making this work.